Mike and Brenda Uncensored. Everything you want to know.
And some things you probably don't.
Most people see us as silly and fun-loving.
But there are times when we need to be more serious.
And that's why we're bringing you this series called On a More Serious Note. Welcome to Mike and Brenda Uncensored. On a More Serious Note.
Yes.
Here we are.
Where we stop the fun and hijinks.
For just a few minutes.
For just a little bit and take things a little more seriously.
What's the weather out today?
No, I don't even know what day it is. And here we are. Normally, I would be at my office or in my rolling office doing something freight related, and you would be doing whatever you do.
Whatever it is I do outside of the house.
Right.
And now I'm doing it inside the house.
Right. And the public thanks you.
They do too,
Yes.
on many levels.
But no, life as we know it has kind of come to a screeching halt.
It has, but we've adapted.
I think
Everybody's
most
adapted.
people are adapting, except for, of course, the people on the front lines in the medical industry and the first responders and the people who are considered essential businesses.
Exactly.
Which technically my alter ego is considered an essential business, but I have the flexibility to do it from the home.
Correct.
Which is wonderful. And one of the organizations that I belong to is the Manufacturers Association of Maine, which is a vital association here in the state of Maine that is headed by Lisa Martin. She is the executive director, and we spoke to her. She is incredibly busy, but she was gracious enough to take time out of her schedule and speak to us on what's going on here in the state of Maine.
Well, hi, Mike and Brenda. Thank you so much for having me. Well, a month ago, we were on our merry way and doing what most associations would be doing, providing, basic and technical assistance to manufacturers and holding networking events and doing the such. Things have certainly changed. And we're finding ourselves at the forefront of manufacturing and sourcing and helping figure out the designs and the materials for PPE, those materials that and products that are essential for the healthcare facilities, anyone who's working in a healthcare environment. So what has changed is that, and I say this, I say this sort of in jest, but for 20 years or more that I've been in this job, I have spent time really out talking about how valuable manufacturing is to the economy, how important manufacturing is to our everyday lives, where people are sitting in an office or sitting in their homes or riding in their cars. Everything that you practically touch is manufactured. Fast forward, here we are today. Manufacturing is at the forefront. We could not and cannot get through this without manufacturing.
Absolutely. And manufacturers are really stepping up to the plate in ways that we haven't seen before or haven't seen in a very, very long time.
That's absolutely correct. And, I've heard a few references back to, World War II when all the women went into the manufacturing facilities. What we're seeing today is that companies are retooling and repurposing their production lines to be making things like hand sanitizer. The cut and sew facilities are stepping up like we've never seen before to be making masks and gowns and boot covers and those types of things. We see companies that have started to work to make 10,000 components for ventilators. So, the interesting thing about manufacturing is that, that phrase, you can turn on a dime. Well, the majority of these companies are turning. And one interesting fact is that several distilleries and breweries here are turning their production lines into making hand sanitizers. You've read about it. People have heard about it. It's one of those things. And at the same time, they have to keep production up on their beverages because that's the nature of where we are at this point.
Absolutely. Talk about, being flexible and using the ingenuity that we have here and the talent that we have not only here in Maine, but across the nation. One of the biggest manufacturers here in the state stepping up, as we were just talking about, LL Bean, making masks for the healthcare industry. And you've been in direct contact with them, as I understand.
That's very true, and because they have been working very specifically to help outfit the health professionals. There are millions of other people that are looking for what we're calling personal or general use masks, and so LL Bean has directed a lot of their calls that they're getting at their call centers to me at the association, where I am talking with people all across the United States. A great deal of them are elders, and these are people who are fearful. These are people who really don't have access to being outdoors, but the few times that they do need to get out, they want to be protected. So I make it my charge to call everybody personally and just find out, number one, if they're in the healthcare industry, and if they are, then we have a system for those folks getting PPE. On the personal side of things, where masks are most critical, we also have a number of companies here in Maine, one specifically who is already manufacturing and online, and then we have a whole number of other companies that are just developing, getting their lines in order, getting the materials there, and starting to manufacture the more personal general use masks.
And on that same note, we also have a company here in Maine that manufactures the testing for the virus, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. It's Abbott in Scarborough, and they have truly stepped up. That's what they do for the most part, but have been able to turn their systems such that they're producing 50,000 testing, kits on a very, very regular basis. So they are ramping up in terms of their production and their workforce. Puritan makes the swabs that are needed and necessary for those tests, and they as well. I've been on the call with them. We are helping to figure out how they turn one of their warehouses has to be turned into to increase the level of manufacturing that they're doing. They also need at least 30 to 40 people to be covering the manufacturing that they're desperately, trying to get out the door as fast as they can. And then you have a company like Stark Systems over in Brunswick, and they manufacture containment systems. And that means that if you generally would go into a school or a hospital or an airport where they're doing construction, they have these portable containment systems that they can put up within a day. There's no plastic flapping. There's no dust getting out. And then the contractors can, do their work and get those done, and then they can take them down and recycle them and reuse them. So they have been in high demand because of the containment needed for the hospitals and those medical facilities. They, again, are looking to bring on 30 to 40 people. And what is happening, interestingly enough, there are companies, and in manufacturing, you've got levels of skills and technology, and so we're doing some matchmaking with companies that are actually looking to, quote, lease employees to other companies. So we've had a lot of people stepping up to provide those options, and I have helped facilitate some of those with a couple large companies here, with some of the smaller ones, and that's what it means, really, in the spirit of collaboration, is making those connections to people that on an ordinary day wouldn't know anybody or wouldn't have connected with such, different organizations.
Fantastic. It's really inspiring to see everyone just coming together and to see the Manufacturers Association of Maine facilitate so many important procedures and changes that are going on that are so necessary.
There are a lot of people and organizations that I would certainly give a shout out to, and those particularly in the manufacturing realm The University of Maine and the Advanced Manufacturing Center there have been doing an amazing, outstanding job of being able to test materials to be able to be used in the medical PPE realm. There's the PTAC and the Maine MEP. There are organizations that have come together and are working so that we could help on the technical side of the companies to look at their production, look at what designs and materials, and then part of that is also getting approved by the CDC. The FDA has lifted a lot of their rules and regs, but in a scenario like this where it's medical and you're working with people and in lives, some of those regs cannot be, lifted.
Right. They have strict policies that they need to adhere to.
We also are, again, talking on a daily basis, and it's very interesting because when I got on a call about 4 weeks ago on a Sunday morning with the Maine Health Supply Chain, they're an organization with Maine Health that manages their supply chain systems. A few weeks later, and several calls and conversations, and I said, 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, we would not have known each other or knew who each other was or what we did. And now here we are today, really collaborating so closely and working together to make sure that the manufacturing sector is hearing and listening and responding to the needs of the medical professionals out there in the field.
It's amazing. It's just amazing how everyone has come together. And that's, I know a lot of the larger businesses have changed, and some of the smaller ones as well have changed their manufacturing, and they're now manufacturing the PPEs and the masks for the healthcare industry. There are also some smaller businesses out there that probably aren't able to do that.
So those businesses that are looking for financial aid, where would the small businesses and the larger businesses here in the state look towards?
So we are directing those to a couple places that have gathered all of that information in one place, which from my perspective would be, it's a huge undertaking and a huge task to do that. One place that we are sending people that they can get answers is Sba.gov. They can go there. They're right on the front page of the state website are resources. The other one that's more specific to manufacturing and what we're doing is at the University of Maine, and there's a link that I provided to you that you could show folks. They could go there and look at where people need help in various areas and industries. There's also links, on small business loans, on HR, Department of Labor, all of those kinds of things that have come into play.
Now, are they on the Manufacturers Association website?
No, we decided that what we're doing on a regular basis, on a daily basis, is to take a lot of that information and get it blasted out to our members and companies all across the state. So we decided to let those that could pull all of that information together in one place do that, and then we would just direct people to those sites.
Now, Lisa, how do you see this changing the face of manufacturing in Maine? Because we will get through this and we will come out the other side, but things are definitely going to be different.
It is, and in several discussions that I've had over the past few weeks, from my perspective, we're looking at really three sort of buckets of companies and capabilities and capacity. There are those that have the capabilities of responding to this pretty directly within days to be able to ramp up, redesign, retool, and get product made. We have in the second bucket are those companies and I've made hundreds of phone calls and found that there are some companies that are not able, because it's not in their wheelhouse, to be making PPE, but they have back orders of products that they're already working on that are sustaining them. And then we have the third bucket that I'm very concerned about, and those companies that are just struggling to survive at this point. So we have been able to do some outreach to those companies, finding out how is the health of your business right now what are you expecting to look at in the short term, in the long term, and we're putting together processes and expertise to be able to direct that information to those companies.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa. It was a pleasure to talk to you as always. And
thank you.
Stay strong, and thank you for all that you do. I don't think there has ever been a better time or a more important time to be a member of the Manufacturers Association of Maine.
That's very true. And, I will leave you with, first I want to thank you both. You're doing such a great service of getting this information out so that people understand that we will get through this. And it just leaves me with sort of a chuckle of a quote that sort of sums up the reality that we're in. And it feels like we are building a boat while we're sailing. And so if you think about that, and those of us that live on the ocean and live on the water and love to be in boats and sail, you can understand and appreciate how critical that is for all of us, because you can't sail and build your boat at the same time.
Right.
You got to have help doing it.
Lisa Martin of the Manufacturers Association of Maine. One of the things that I found interesting that she said is that there is labor sharing going on among different manufacturers. So if a manufacturer is not able to continue or doesn't have the resources or the needs to have their full workforce, there are other manufacturers that have shifted their gears to start manufacturing PPE for the front lines that are actually temporarily sourcing their labor from other manufacturers who are having to furlough or lay off. And I thought that was amazing.
It is nice to see that type of cooperation, up here during times like this.
But remember you were talking about Ford changing their lines during the war?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, during World War II, their plant, Willow Run, I believe it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but they stopped making automobiles and swapped right over to making bombers for World War II. And they were putting out aircraft.
Yeah.
They are. And Ford now is struggling. I read today where their stock is down, 40% for the year. They're going to be posting 16% loss for the second quarter. And so those guys are struggling. And GM and Chrysler Fiat, they're struggling as well with this whole thing.
No, I was talking to one of the agencies for freight that we have out in Columbus, and she was talking about the airlines are just garaging their planes.
They are, but like we talked about before, you take Delta, for example, and this gave them, they were set up better than most before this all happened, just because of the way they've structured their finances and their long-term goals, where they've implementing retiring some of their older fleet early, which they were going to anyway. So they just sped up the process. So took those right off the books. And they're going to be retiring some older pieces of equipment. And they've furloughed some of their employees. A lot of employees have taken voluntary time off. Delta has adapted quite well.
Right. They're still taking a hit. There's no doubt that they're taking a hit.
But they've got a smart team in place at the helm.
And I was reading that Hartsfield-Jackson, which is the busiest airport in the world, used to see 2,600 flights a day, and every flight was almost always booked at maximum capacity. And now they're seeing 1,200 flights a day, and the planes are almost empty.
Yeah. And a lot of these planes have to fly empty or almost empty just to keep their slot in the takeoff and landing order, because if they don't, they lose it.
In the airport schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and their route too, because the FAA issues so many spots a day to fly. So if that plane doesn't go up in there, you could lose your spot. You may not get it back.
Fascinating.
So they only allow so many a day.
It's fascinating. There's so many areas of different industries that are affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we could go on and on and on, and that's why we're bringing you this series called On a More Serious Note.
And we'd like to thank Lisa Martin, the Executive Director for the Manufacturers Association of Maine, for sharing her insight.
Absolutely. We're going to add the links to the bottom of the podcast in the description so that if anyone needs to reach out to Lisa, they will find the link there. Also, the links to the SBA websites as well.
Mike and Brenda Uncensored.
On a more serious note,
Like and subscribe to stay current. New episodes daily.